For centuries, the birth of a royal child carried enormous weight. One newborn's fate could alter the destiny of an entire nation. From the moment of their arrival, royal heirs were expected to embody strength, intelligence, and the unshakable aura of divine blessing. These children were groomed not just as sons and daughters but as future warriors, diplomats, and sovereigns who would one day hold in their hands the stability of dynasties and empires. To falter in this preparation was to risk the collapse of kingdoms. Yet what happened when a royal child was born different? What if the heir could not speak clearly, could not walk with ease, or struggled to learn what tutors tried to teach? In the eyes of kings and queens, this was not simply a family matter but a scandal that threatened the very image of monarchy itself. Throughout history, countless royal children born with disabilities were quietly hidden away, institutionalized, or even declared dead while still alive. Their existence was not only a challenge for families who lacked the medical understanding we have today but also a political crisis in courts obsessed with appearances. Monarchies thrived on the image of perfection, on the idea that royal bloodlines were stronger, purer, and divinely ordained. To admit imperfection was to admit weakness. This is the forgotten story of royal children born with Down syndrome, a genetic condition that was misunderstood for centuries, and the shocking ways their families treated them in order to protect the reputation of the throne. Today, medical science gives us a clear understanding of Down syndrome. It is a genetic condition caused by the presence of an extra chromosome. Whereas most people inherit 46 chromosomes, individuals with Down syndrome have 47, the extra copy being chromosome 21. This additional genetic material changes the way the body and brain develop, leading to differences in appearance, muscle tone, and intellectual growth. People with Down syndrome often share certain physical features, such as almond-shaped eyes, a flatter facial profile, smaller ears, and a single crease across the palm. They may also face health challenges, including heart conditions, thyroid disorders, and developmental delays. Yet, despite these challenges, people with Down syndrome live full and meaningful lives, pursuing education, careers, relationships, and active roles in their communities. But in centuries past, before genetics was understood, these differences were terrifying mysteries. Families and societies interpreted disability through the lenses of superstition and stigma. Many believed such births were curses from God, signs of divine displeasure, or evidence of a tainted bloodline. In royal families, where every heir was meant to embody strength and perfection, the birth of a child with Down syndrome was often seen as an unbearable shame. Instead of receiving support, love, and care, many of these children were deliberately hidden from view. Among the most documented cases of this tragic secrecy are the stories of Nerissa and Katherine Bowes-Lyon, first cousins of Queen Elizabeth II. Nerissa was born in 1919, and Katherine followed in 1926. From a young age, it became clear that the sisters had severe intellectual disabilities. While historians debate whether they specifically had Down syndrome or another closely related condition, what remains undisputed is how their family treated them. Rather than raising them in the royal household, their relatives decided to send them to the Royal Elswood Hospital in Surrey, a long-term institution for people with developmental disabilities. Once institutionalized, the sisters were effectively erased from public memory. The family went so far as to falsify official records, listing both as deceased despite the fact that they were very much alive. Nerissa lived at Elswood until her death in 1986, and Katherine remained there until her own passing in 2014. Reports suggest that they received few, if any, visits from their relatives. For decades, no one outside the hospital knew that these women were connected to the royal family. It was not until the 1980s, when investigative journalists uncovered the truth, that their story entered public consciousness. The revelation sparked outrage and intense debate, with critics accusing the monarchy of cold-heartedness and hypocrisy. In reality, the treatment of Nerissa and Katherine was not unique but reflected a broader cultural tendency to conceal relatives with disabilities. Even well into the 20th century, the fear of scandal outweighed compassion, and families preferred erasure over acknowledgement. A slightly different story unfolded in Germany with Princess Alexandrine of Prussia. Born in 1915, she was the daughter of Crown Prince Wilhelm of Prussia. From her earliest years, it was apparent that she had Down syndrome, though the terminology was not widely known at the time. Unlike Nerissa and Katherine, Alexandrine was not institutionalized. Her parents made the decision to raise her within the family, allowing her to remain at home rather than consigning her to a distant institution. Alexandrine even appeared occasionally in public. She featured in some family photographs and commemorative postcards, though her public role was carefully limited. She never participated in royal duties and was kept away from the political stage. Instead, she attended a special school and lived quietly with her relatives. She survived well into adulthood, passing away in 1980. Though her life was more comfortable than that of the Bowes-Lyon sisters, Alexandrine's story still demonstrates the underlying stigma. A royal child with Down syndrome could be loved privately, but she could never be allowed to represent the dynasty publicly. Her existence had to remain largely in the background, proof that inclusion did not extend to visibility. Beyond royal circles, one of the most poignant stories comes from the family of Charles de Gaulle, who would later become President of France. His daughter and was born in 1928 with Down syndrome. Although she was not technically royal, she was part of one of Europe's most prominent families. Unlike many children of her time, and was not institutionalized. Her parents, Charles and Yvonne de Gaulle, chose to raise her at home. And was deeply cherished, especially by her father, who was said to share a tender and close bond with her. Yet even in this loving household, Anne's life remained shielded from the public. Her condition was rarely discussed openly, and she was seldom seen at official events. In 1948, tragedy struck when Anne died of pneumonia at the age of 20. Her death devastated her parents. In her memory, Yvonne de Gaulle later established the foundation Anne de Gaulle, dedicated to the care of children with disabilities. Anne's story remains unusual for her time because it reflected genuine compassion and a willingness to accept her as part of the family, even if quietly. Yet it also highlights how social pressures still dictated secrecy. The world was not ready to embrace a public figure with Down syndrome, even within a powerful and respected family. The examples of Nerissa, Katherine, Alexandrine, and Anne are among the few well-documented cases from the 20th century, but they almost certainly represent only a fraction of the true number of royal children born with disabilities throughout history. In medieval and early modern times, when medical understanding was even more limited, children born with visible differences or intellectual disabilities often suffered harsher fates. Historical records, though fragmentary, suggest that such children were sometimes abandoned or sent to live in remote estates. In other cases, they were given to monasteries or convents, where they would live out their days in obscurity. Royal households, obsessed with projecting strength and divine favor, considered a disabled child to be a dangerous blemish on the dynasty's image. Some historians even speculate that infants with severe disabilities may have been quietly killed shortly after birth, their existence erased from memory before rumors could spread. Direct evidence of such practices is rare, precisely because secrecy was the point. What was not written down could not be used against the royal house. This culture of silence was not confined to any one monarchy. Across Europe and beyond, dynasties relied as much on myth and perception as on armies and alliances. To admit that a royal bloodline had produced a child with a disability was, in many eyes, to undermine the very legitimacy of the throne. Thus, a legacy of isolation and erasure grew, in which countless children were denied the dignity of recognition. The concealment of royal children with disabilities was not merely a matter of personal shame, but a deliberate political strategy. Monarchies thrived on the illusion of divine perfection. The king or queen was not just a ruler but a symbol, a living embodiment of the nation's strength. To reveal weakness in the royal family was to invite doubt about the nation itself. For this reason, royal families developed intricate mechanisms of secrecy. Servants were sworn to silence, official records were falsified, and carefully curated portraits and ceremonies reinforced the image of perfection. While the public saw images of radiant heirs and confident monarchs, behind closed doors, other children lived lives of obscurity. Their absence was explained through vague references to illness or, in some cases, outright declarations of death. This deliberate erasure highlights how deeply reputation mattered in an age when monarchies competed not only with rival nations but with growing public scrutiny. For the children themselves, the cost of this secrecy was devastating. Many lived in cold institutions, deprived of familial love and social connection. Others grew up in isolation, far from the lives of their siblings. Their names disappeared from genealogies, their faces from portraits, and their stories from official chronicles. They became ghosts in history, existing only in whispers or in the margins of archival notes. The injustice lies not only in the neglect they suffered but also in the deliberate denial of their humanity. They were children of kings and queens, princes and princesses, yet they were stripped of their birthright to be seen, acknowledged, and loved. Their existence was treated as a flaw to be corrected through concealment. Today, the world is very different. People with Down syndrome now have access to medical care, education, and social support systems that allow them to thrive. They attend schools, pursue careers, and live independently. They compete in sports, act in films, run businesses, and form loving relationships. More importantly, they are recognized as valued members of society. Families celebrate their children openly, and advocacy movements ensure that voices with Down syndrome are heard. But this progress is recent. Only a few generations separate us from the time when Nerissa and Katherine lived in obscurity, when Alexandrine was shielded from the public, and when Anne de Gaulle was cherished but hidden. Their stories remind us how fragile progress can be and how quickly compassion can give way to fear when image and reputation are valued above humanity. The stories of these children are more than just sad chapters in royal history. They are lessons. They remind us that no family, no matter how powerful, is immune to the fear of judgment. They remind us of the pain that secrecy and shame can cause when love is not allowed to be stronger than image. And they challenge us, even today, to build a society that does not hide or marginalize difference, but embraces it fully as part of the human story.